Okay, I wanted to provide a brief explanation of ethics and values as they are related to applied spiritual, ethical, religious counseling. If we just go to our content, Module 2, click on Ethical Choices and Values, and these are our notes for this. Ethical choices and values. There's a big difference between ethics and values. Primarily, when we make ethical decisions, there is a right or wrong answer, at least according to laws, organizations, court rulings, ethical guidelines, things like that. We're going to discuss that. Value decisions, there is technically not a right or wrong answer, only as it relates to you personally. So let's discuss how to go about making an ethical decision and the difference between ethical decisions and value decisions, especially when it applies to pastoral care and counseling, because we all have to abide by ethical decisions, but value decisions tend to come into play a little more when we're discussing belief systems. So the first thing we need to understand is look at ourselves. Do we have any personal biases? Do we have any specific values or belief systems that impact decision making in our counseling practices? So self-awareness, self-examination is really the key to good ethical value decision making. When we think about ethical decision making, there are places where we can go that provide very specific answers to our questions. And this is one reason why we always recommend belonging to larger organizations such as ACA, the American Counseling Association, ASCA, the American School Counseling Association, NBCC, the National Board for Certified Counselors, state organizations, PCA, the Pennsylvania Counseling Association, PSCA, the Pennsylvania School Counseling Association. So you could even look towards APA, the American Psychological Association. There's a lot of other organizations. Those are the primary ones in our field. If you don't have access to a lawyer to get legal guidelines, the national organization should be able to provide you with that information. So there is a hierarchy of places to look. So the first place, if you have an ethical decision to make regarding a counseling case, the first place to look is legal guidelines. And the legal guidelines that take priority are national or federal laws. If there are no national or federal laws on the books, state laws apply next. And if there are no state or federal national laws on the books, we look to court precedent. And we can first look at national court precedents, for instance, court precedents set by the Supreme Court, or state court precedents. A court precedent is when there is not a law on the books, state or national law, and yet there has been a court case and a court decision made regarding the issue. Now, we're not lawyers. That's why we belong to national organizations. They can tell us if there are court precedents, if there are state laws, if there are national laws regarding a specific ethical choice. Beyond that, each of our professional organizations has ethical guidelines, and we must abide by not only one organization's ethical guidelines, but all of the organizations to which we belong. So each organization like ACA will publish ethical guidelines that you can look at on the internet as a member of their organization. I think they're open even if you're not a member of their organization. A third thing we have to abide by is ongoing supervision. If you're in school, you'll have supervision from your professors. You'll also have on-site supervision from your supervisor. And if you are not in school, it's a good idea to have ongoing supervision either through peer supervision, a supervisor at work, a treatment team, or if you have a private practice, you could even hire outside supervision. It's a good thing if your supervision your supervisor giving you supervision has a license in the field. For instance, licensed professional counselor, LPC in Pennsylvania. That would be an example. Beyond supervision, to discuss cases, and all that should be confidential, most licenses, certificates, things like that also require continuing education. That would be through CEUs, continuing education units, or Act 48 credits, courses, if you take additional courses, such as these courses in spirituality counseling. These can count as continuing education. And most organizations, like your LPC, your NCC, your counseling certificates, they all require so many continuing education units within 1 year or 2 years. And all of these things help you to keep up to date on whatever the contemporary issues, ethical issues, and practices are. So, I would say that appropriate practice should also include a good understanding of confidentiality and the limits of confidentiality. And before you begin counseling anybody, you have to explain both confidentiality and the limits of confidentiality to your clients. And this is with any type of counseling. It's a good idea even if you're not a therapist, if you're a minister or work in a specific health field or a helping service. It's a good idea to abide by the limits of confidentiality as well. If there's a possibility that your client is a harm to self or others through abuse, suicidal ideation, need for hospitalization, you would need to contact the right individuals, whether it is call 911, contact parent or guardians if they are if they are a minor, or something like that. If the client's a minor, parents or guardian may request your records. If a court subpoenas your records, you do have to release them. It's important to communicate with your site supervisor, your treatment team, especially if you're in practicum or internship. And I would recommend that we abide by confidentiality in this class if people are sharing personal things. For instance, if you post about your personal journey, I would appreciate it if all the members of this class keep that confidential. You can discuss it in this class, but don't take it outside of this class if somebody shares something personally. So, it's also important to understand our own qualifications, limitations, and when it's appropriate to make a referral. So if we look in here, the first thing, we cannot abandon a client. We can't just say, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable seeing you. that is abandoning a client. We have to give them appropriate referrals. We have to follow up to see if they need anything. And we have to have an appropriate reason for referring the client. One of the reasons would be that we do not feel qualified to help the client. So perhaps knowing our own limitations is one of the most important things that we can do. So perhaps we are not experts in specific areas. One example might be eating disorders. Perhaps we don't feel comfortable, or that we don't have enough qualifications in that area. Many times, if you're under supervision, your supervisor can provide you with enough resources, as long as the client is not in a life-threatening situation. It's important not to give advice. If we give advice and it doesn't work out, we may be to blame. It's important to foster and facilitate awareness in the client that leads to clients' individual choices regarding their own life changes. Then they take ownership of those choices, they follow through with them, and they take responsibility for them. I don't personally believe in labeling a client, however there is value in using the DSM-5. It's important to know that there's all types of diversity. Diversity can include age, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, spirituality, socioeconomic status, geographical location, previous trauma, personal appearance, and the list goes on. It's important that we respect diversity, that we build trust with our clients, and that we are open to learning about our clients' culture and diversity. I've said this many times already, do not impose your personal values upon one another or the client. Think about what cases you may be able to handle and what you might not be able to handle. An example might be a client who's a pedophile. I felt uncomfortable when I received my first client who was a pedophile. I asked for additional supervision, brought it up in treatment team, and my supervisor also gave me the option to refer. You may need to refer, and once again you have to have a valid reason. You have to give referrals of positive options, other counselors, other organizations, and you need to follow up to see if the client needs anything else as well. Those are all the aspects of ethics. The only other thing I might mention ethically is understanding boundaries. You cannot have a dual relationship with a client. You cannot enter into a personal relationship with a client. A client cannot be a relative. You cannot enter into a romance or a dating situation. You cannot enter into a business with a client. So maintaining professional boundaries with clients is really very, very important. And I would say those are the primary aspects to become an ethical counselor. If you have questions, you can refer to your organizations, you can refer to your supervisors, you can refer to your ethical guidelines. So, what's the difference between these ethics and values? Well, values do not have a right or wrong answers. Values have more to do with belief systems. And there is a gray area. So let me give you an example. You may have your own belief system, and you have to ask yourself, can I counsel this client without imposing my personal values upon the client? So it doesn't matter what you personally believe in this example. Perhaps you believe in pro-life. Perhaps you believe in pro-choice. Whichever you believe in, you cannot impose your values upon a client if they ask questions regarding a pregnancy or decisions regarding that pregnancy. Here's an example of a gray area. You may believe that you are providing them with information. It's important that you provide them with all of the possible information, not just one side of the information. Withholding information is imposing your personal value. So it's important to ask yourself, when there is a value question, can you counsel a client, give them all of the information available without imposing your personal values? If the answer is no, based on your values, you need to refer the client. If the answer is yes, it's important to bring this up in supervision so that you can monitor how the progress is going. So values have more to do with personal belief systems rather than ethics. And when we begin talking about meaning and spirituality and religion, it's important for you to understand what your values are and to understand how you will be able to relate to a client who has different values than yours. Okay, that is a very brief synopsis. We actually have an entire course for the certificate on ethics in this field.